DCP Player free. Get it now from digital.net.au.
So, practical approach for using or for delivering UHD. I wanted to be able to focus on what we're doing at Sony and how we decided to dive headlong into IMF for a particular project that that we had, and so I'm glad that Arjun and Annie have really covered more of the technical details of IMF, because I could just focus on a story. So, 100 UHD titles in 1 year. That was a challenge. We basically had, that was really only part of the challenge. We really, once we remastered these 100 titles, how are we going to actually deliver it to an encoding facility to actually get it to the consumers? That was really the challenge. So back in early 2012, when Chris Cookson approached us at Colorworks about remastering these 100 titles, Sony Electronics was in the process of developing some new UHD sets. And they wanted 4K content for their new 4K Video Unlimited service that would launch about the same time when the TVs came out. So this was an ambitious plan, obviously, to take on and try to deliver 100 UHD titles in that time. But we had figured at that time, we had taken a little bit of an estimated survey of how much content was even available in 4K for the cinema across the entire industry. We estimated there were maybe 75 titles that had actually been mastered in 4K for the cinema. So, additionally, these new displays would also have an expanded color gamut, XVYCC, and to provide more saturated colors. So not only did we have to remaster this content, which was, a challenge in and of itself, but we also had to figure out how we were going to take on this expanded color gamut challenge and still support our standard Rec 7 and 9 workflows. So, and if that wasn't enough, we tried to pile on as many things as we can at one time. So we also had to support this new mastered in 4K Blu-ray workflow, where this new Blu-ray would actually be derived from the UHD files and have expanded color as well. And we also had to support our traditional Blu-ray work, our Rec 709 Blu-ray workflows, because those weren't going away. And all the miscellaneous things that once we have file-based masters, there are all these other things that people want deliveries of. So we had to figure out how we were going to support all that at the same time. So, in order to remaster the titles and create truly compelling 4K content, we had to go back to the original sources. We really felt that going back to the original film camera negatives, going back to the original 4K digital sources, and obviously visual effects are the visual effects. We can't help that. Some 2K, some 4K, but whatever it is, we would go back to all the original sources and reassemble, recolor, and create these new masters. So at that point, we estimated that we were going to be delivering somewhere between 800 terabytes and a petabyte of information, of uncompressed data for all these titles, which, as strange as it sounds, and we had to get that into all of the different distribution and encoding pipelines. And this wasn't going to be easy, and it may sound strange, but I wasn't really worried about being able to remaster 100 titles. We had Colorworks built from the ground up to do 4K. So, being able to remaster the content wasn't the first and foremost thing on my mind. It was, oh my God, how are we going to deliver this? So, and even if we could deliver that, if we could have all the content delivered to somebody, think about the encoding facilities who would have to take that data. It didn't sound practical. So, fortunately, we've been involved in this project, as Annie and Howard have mentioned. We've been involved in IMF from the beginning, and I had a thought. maybe we could actually use IMF to lighten the load a bit. We could actually take the uncompressed data and keep the expanded color and create masters, IMF masters, that we'd be able to deliver to the encoding facilities. So we'd also been having discussions as Disney and Warner and Fox, figuring out how we're going to use IMF in the studio in the future anyway. And we figured, well, if we're going to have to go down this path, why don't we figure out how much or how we can actually utilize the work that we're going to do anyway of remastering these titles to start building our library of IMFs. So from our work in DCI and delivering digital cinema to the marketplace, and the work in the ETC and within SMPTE, we decided to take the next steps and jump into building an IMF solution. So we did extensive testing to ensure that we were maintaining a very high quality picture from the 4K EXR original masters into the J2K encoding in the IMF. So we ultimately settled on App2 broadcast profile level 5. It is lossy, but it maintains very, very high picture quality. And we're 400 megabits per second average, 800 megabits per second peak. So while they did cover the workflow portion, I had to put something up there. I am an engineer, so we have to have something up here to at least have engineering credit. So this is a very high level workflow, very, very high level workflow of the process. So, but basically, we're taking the 4K EXRs from ColorWorks, compressing to J2K. We then hand those over to our Post Media Center, another encoding and authoring facility. They wrap it, package it, service it. And at the same time, we also figured out that one of the challenges that we had were people wrapping their head around, how am I going to service X? How am I going to service Y off of this? And so what we decided to do, we were using Clipster, so we actually did some testing. We figured out we could actually use our UHD IMF master as the source for directly going to HDCAM SR tape if we needed to. So we encourage people to take file delivery, but if they need a tape, we can make a tape directly from the UHD master rather than having to go to an intermediate mezzanine, HD mezzanine file to output. So, beyond the JPEG 2000 compression, you heard Andy and Arjun both talk about the component-based nature of IMF. And so that's the real power behind IMF. I mean, JPEG 2000, we're very familiar with it, digital cinema, all the other things we've got going on, but the real power is this component-based nature of IMF. And if we take this episode of Breaking Bad, for example, this is the full-length original version. I think it's episode 205. Not that that really matters, but and so we have the full-length version here with commercial blacks and 5.1 audio. The OVUHD IMF package for this particular episode is 143 gigabytes. Not too bad. But the nice thing is, if we want to make a full black version of this, we can actually take those same assets that were used in the original version and use the exact same picture and sound track files and create a CPL to create this full black version without any space penalty. I mean, 162 kilobytes. So that's the true power of IMF, is all of this space savings that we get. 2 versions for the price of 1. And so we were able to drastically reduce the amount of space that we were consuming in the packaging process with these masters. So I had to put a chart in too. So you may be wondering how we actually did in this book. In the first year, we actually delivered more than 100 titles. We currently have 180 UHD IMF packages, and that represents about 250 hours of programming, all in 4K. All UHD saved as UHD IMF packages. So we've already generated over 1 petabyte of uncompressed data so far, but our IMF masters are actually consuming only 5% of the original uncompressed space. That's practical. That makes delivering UHD actually practical. So that, and so the UHD IMF masters for that are only 43 terabytes. So with no loss in image quality, and really makes it easy. So we take a movie like Lawrence of Arabia, one of our longest titles, and challenges all over the place. That was about 16 terabytes uncompressed of picture, and that's now 850 gigabytes. So we take Breaking Bad, one of our most popular UHD properties. All 62 episodes consumed about 230 terabytes uncompressed. All 62 UHD IMF masters only take about 13 terabytes. That's about 210 gigs an episode, and which is on par with a 100-minute feature in ProRes 444. I don't think anybody complains about trying to deliver a ProRes 444 type. So, where are we now? We've actually moved on to new theatrical video mastering. So the project was to take a lot of catalog content, but we've actually moved on to new theatrical video mastering, which is a much bigger challenge, as for all the reasons that Arjun and Andy have talked about, with all the localization and much tighter time frames, and so we wanted to be able to see, could we actually take on the new theatrical mastering part in IMF, and we have. So we basically are now, it is our primary deliverable out of all of our titles, whether they be 2K titles or 4K titles, delivering HD or UHD. So, and that's for all aspect ratios, original aspect ratio, 177 full frame, and yes, even the 4:3 pens. As much as I'd like to see it go away. As well as localized versions. So we're doing this for HD titles like The Equalizer, Heaven is for Real, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2, and for UHD titles like Amazing Spider-Man 2, About Last Night, and Deliver Us from Evil. We're also creating UHD IMF masters for 4K television episodes of Blacklist and Masters of Sex. And even more TV shows are going to be coming out, being captured, finished, and delivered in 4K for next season. So for localization, this is very similar to what Andy and Arjun were talking about, but I thought I'd use a specific example of how we're doing it, just to show that this is just a real thing. It's not just theory. And not that yours is theory. Yours is real too. But so with Cloudy 2, here's the domestic version. I marked just the section where the texted title is at. And if you also note that the highlighted file in the bin in the upper left is actually the domestic OV picture track file. So now with the Latin American Spanish version, we actually have that section is actually replaced in a CPL. This is actually the Latin American Spanish CPL that I've loaded up. And so that same section has localized, or the CPL itself refers to several localized inserts, which are on the left there. But the main picture asset on top that's highlighted is the same domestic OV picture file. So for Cloudy 2, the OV picture track file is 40 gigabytes. And the Latin American Spanish localized inserts add up to about 10 gigabytes. Did I say 40 gigabytes? Did I say that? So 40 gigabytes, localized assets are about 10 gigabytes. As Arjun knows, there's a lot of inserts for animated titles. But still, that's 30 gigabytes per localized version that's saved. That's tremendous. So you add that to the number of titles, the number of localized versions, and I mean, space savings add up very quickly. So, we're able to reduce the overall load with data load with JPEG 2000. We're able to reduce the demands on the data repository, and we can keep all of our elements in sync. That's another beautiful thing about IMF, is being able to keep these things in sync as they travel through. And now with the App 2 extensions that are being worked on in Cinepy, we're looking forward to a future where we can add high dynamic range picture track file to the IMF package with all the current assets that sit there. So just recently, we started delivering our Breaking Bad UHD IMF packages to Netflix for their new 4K streaming service. Netflix is starting to move to an all IMF delivery future. And for the very same reason, for these very same space savings reasons, it's this file explosion that's really bogging everybody down. And so we're going to be encouraging other services to accept the IMF as the preferred delivery format as well. So I want to take a moment to thank the engineers at Sony who actually worked on this to make it a reality, because as you probably imagine, this was a challenging project. So Mike Whipple, Chris Clark, Brian Whipple, and Yoshi Takashima were instrumental in making this a reality. But I just want to leave you with one parting thing. IMF, it works.